So, hello gang. Nice to see you all again. I assume this is the same crowd I've been talking to for the last few days, but there may be a few new people here. This is the third talk that we're having now on the ocean and on marine conservation, based on the ocean row that's taking place from Africa to America at the moment, and it's just a good opportunity to start reviewing our knowledge and talk a bit about the issues and topics surrounding the oceans. So, first of all, today we're going to talk about uses in the ocean and how we end up using the ocean. Very quickly, in case there's anyone new, to introduce myself again, my name's Sean Brilliant. I'm the manager for the National Marine Conservation Program for the Canadian Wildlife Federation. My background is marine ecology, experimental marine ecology, and I've been working in marine conservation for about 20 years now, and really enjoy having an opportunity to talk about the ocean and show you guys some of these things that fascinate me about it as well. So let's talk about this. So we've talked a bit about the oceans themselves. So our planet is mostly ocean. It is mostly ocean. It is not mostly land. And it is huge. It is so large we have a hard time even understanding how large it is and comprehending how deep it is. We haven't been to all parts of it. There are large parts of it we don't know about. It just comprises a large part of our planet, and we're still learning a lot about it. At one time, we didn't think we could affect the ocean, but we can, and it's wildlife. This photo from a century or more ago shows a bunch of fishermen bringing in some ground fish. You know, we didn't think that we could actually cause any problem to the wildlife in the ocean or affect the ocean in any way, but we can, and we know that now. And this is what I'm going to talk about today. This is a shot from a deep sea submersible off the west coast of Canada at like 1,200 meters, and here they are surveying the ocean bottom, and they come across a paint can. How crazy is this? And this is very common. This happens all the time. In fact, there's a report coming out soon about a recent dive. James Cameron, you know, the famous filmmaker, he was involved in building this super submersible that took him to the deepest part of the ocean, like 12 kilometers underwater. He went to the very bottom of the ocean. And while they were down there, they took a bunch of video and pictures. And one of the things that they saw down there was a weight from a submersible from a previous human expedition. Like the most inhospitable part of the planet, and there is still evidence that humans are there and that we're having some sort of effect. So I'm going to talk about the various things, the ways that we use the ocean and the opportunities to use it. And what I'd like to do is do a quick survey. So I see there's 25 of you there in the class, and I'd like to do a quick survey to see who does use the ocean and to give you a sense of the fact that you may also be involved in using the ocean as well. So the first thing we're going to talk about is fishing. We use the ocean for fishing. So I wonder if we can just do a quick show of hands and a quick count. How many people here in the classroom eat fish? And I'm talking marine fish, and I'm not just talking cod or halibut or hake. I'm talking lobster and clams or mussels. Can we get a quick show of hands? How many? And Randy can count them up and report to me. And not everybody. I'm not going to judge you if you don't eat seafood. I eat seafood. I eat it all. I've tried to eat it all. Yeah? So fishing is an important resource of the ocean that we collect. It's a renewable resource because it's a living resource. Here's some fishermen, lobster fishermen here, crab fishermen. It's an important part of our existence on this planet. 11 out of 25 students, amazing. So it's an important part of our source of food. It's an extremely important source of protein for people around the world, one of the largest sources of protein. So it's an important use. Unfortunately, there is some abuses from fishing as well. One is destructive fishing. This is an example of a trawl being dragged across the ocean, and it sweeps up the animals or the fish that we're pursuing to try and capture. In the process of doing that, it can actually destroy the bottom. This is a shot of a bottom after a trawl has gone through and it sort of dragged up the sea and made a mess of things, and so it essentially destroyed the habitat that was there previously. It can also haul up things that we don't want to haul, such as large corals that get destroyed as we're dragging it across, get dragged up. And we only realize that we've done this after we pulled up the catch to see what was there. So this is another problem with the destructive fishing. Another thing with fishing that's a bit of a problem is the ecological changes it causes. So here's a picture of a whole bunch of different fish, and what we start doing, when we started fishing in the oceans, we were looking for sort of the big fish, the large sharks, the tunas, you know, the large cod, the groundfish, and these are the fish that we went after. As we depleted these, as we ran out of them because we fished them harder than they can replenish themselves, we start going after the smaller and smaller fish, and down the food chain, essentially, that we talked about the other day, and this is called fishing down the food chain. And this can cause ecological changes in the ocean. Here on the East Coast where I live, we've already seen this happen. This fish on the left here is a codfish, and we fished this quite heavily for many centuries, but in particular for about 10 or 20 years ago, we fished them very hard, and then we had to stop fishing them because there are so few of them. What happened here on the East Coast is it changed the whole ecosystem, because this fish used to eat juvenile lobster, which is the picture on the right there. And now that there's not so many of these fish around, lobster seem to have grown like crazy, and they're everywhere. So now the lobster fishery is one of the biggest fisheries on the East Coast, and we've caused this change to occur because we fished one fish out of the way, and now there's another one there that we're eating. So we didn't think we could ever do this, but we can actually change the ecology of systems based on how much we remove from them. We need to keep this in mind. Another thing about fishing is the bycatch. So as you can see, we catch enormous amounts of fish. We use equipment that just sweeps incredibly large parts of the ocean to gather up the fish that we want. The only problem is the fish don't come in clean packages. When you sweep up the ocean like this, you're bound to catch all kinds of other things. This is a catch of crab, but you can see that there's lots of fish mixed in with it as well, which weren't the target species that we were looking for. But nonetheless, because the fishing methods we use are fairly not specific, they tend to get a lot of this bycatch. And sometimes they end up catching things that are totally not even on our radar, things that we don't want to catch at all, birds and other large animals, large marine vertebrates like sharks and so on. So this is also a type of bycatch. This is when you are capturing animals that you aren't intending to capture. You can also entangle animals. This is a picture of a right whale with a rope wrapped around it, and this is a leatherback turtle. Large marine vertebrates can sort of blunder into fishing gear and fishing ropes, and it winds around them. And when it does this, it can stay on them for a very long time and cause them a lot of harm and injury. And there's efforts to try and disentangle them and so on, but it can be a real threat, particularly to species at risk, like the leatherback turtle or the right whale. And these are all challenges that we have with the fishing industry. All right, another use for the ocean is transportation. Has anyone ever mailed anything overseas, a large package overseas? Has anyone ever received a large package from overseas? Not the U.S. We're connected to the U.S. You can drive there. How many people have mailed something overseas? How many people have traveled by boat overseas as well, which would be another example, I guess? Right? This all has to do with transportation. The ocean is an important source. It's a highway of moving large amounts of products from one country to another and all over the place. Let me see, I'm getting my numbers now. 5, all right, not too many, but some people have obviously been involved in the shipping and transportation industry. Shipping and transportation has some challenges as well. As we know, ships that are plying the ocean can have spills, they can have accidents, and they lose their product overboard. And when it's things like oil, that becomes a very bad thing. The other thing about shipping and transportation, of course, is that they share the ocean with many other animals. Here are a bunch of humpback whales swimming by a large tanker as it's going by. Ship strikes on animals can cause injuries and death as well. And the ships also create a lot of noise in the ocean. And recent research has been showing that there's so much extra noise in the ocean from all of the vessels traveling the ocean that whales, who are very acoustic animals, they listen and they communicate to each other by sound, can't hear and can't communicate as far away as they used to. And now we're realizing that we're having this impact, and we hadn't realized it before. Okay, mining and oil and drilling that goes on in the ocean. Most of our planet is covered with oil, not with oil. Most of our planet is covered with water, so it makes sense that a lot of the non-renewable resources, minerals and oil and so on, occur within the ocean. How many people here drive cars, I guess, and use oil? We have 25 students. There is a lot of drilling that's going on in the ocean. It requires these large platforms to actually burrow into the seafloor and to extract oil. In other cases, there's actually other non-renewable resources like minerals. This is a picture of what's called a manganese field. Manganese is an element, and these nodules precipitated out of the ocean and are settled on the floor. They all get driven. Wow, 25 out of 25. Not surprising at all. I do as well. I own a car and I regularly fill it with gas. I don't know how much manganese there is in my life, but probably quite a bit as well. But the idea is that in the ocean there is a lot of non-renewable resources, so we mine the ocean, we drill the ocean for these things. In order to do that, we of course end up destroying some habitat, but also in order to explore the ocean and find these resources, we have to do acoustic surveys from boats to be able to blast sound onto the sea floor, and we listen to what comes back up and it tells us what's there. This actually is a big challenge as well for animals, especially whales. There are some observations that suggest that this acoustic or seismic sound can cause a lot of damage to whales, either acutely or like immediately causing them a lot of damage, or over the long term it can cause them damage because they can't hear as well and so on. So this is sort of the repercussion of us doing mining and drilling in the ocean. Aquaculture is something that we do in the ocean. These are salmon cages or fin cages. We also grow mussels. We also grow oysters, and even seaweed now. Well, so the idea is that we don't need to just go out and harvest what's growing in the ocean, but very careful, we can actually grow animals that we want to eat or sell or use for a purpose in the ocean. Aquaculture is becoming very important. What we're only finding now, this is a relatively new industry as well, what we're finding now is that just like farming takes up space on land and sort of destroys, in a sense, habitat in order to make space for domestic animals, aquaculture is doing the same sort of thing, but it's even more complicated. Like we mentioned today, the ocean is habitat in 3 dimensions, as opposed to being on land where everything is in 2 dimensions. So things are harder to contain and control. And we're finding that aquaculture has a lot of challenges because although it's an opportunity to create a lot of product, it seems like it may have a lot of impact on local wildlife unless we're careful with it as well. Recreation is the next thing that's important. How many people here have been to the ocean is my first question. And the second question is, how many people have gone whale watching? Has anyone actually seen a live whale? So first question, and the second question. I've done both. I do both as much as I can, actually, but I live near an ocean, so it's a little bit easier. I have the advantage that way. Whale watching is not the only thing, the only source of recreation that we get. Deep sea fishing or fishing as a recreational process as opposed to a commercial process is also an example of ocean recreation. And for some people, walking along the ocean and being near the ocean is an important part of recreation as well, and they like to be near the ocean and to smell the ocean and see it and know what's there. People also like to hang out on marine beaches and live near the ocean too, and that can have its challenges because people want to be there. This means that we have to modify the coastline so that we can live there and use it. So 12 have been to the ocean, 3 have gone whale watching. Wow, fascinating. This is cool. I like that. So here's a shot of sort of a recreational marina, and clearly the coastline did not look like that naturally. We had to modify it so that it suited our purposes to use it. And in doing that, we are affecting how the ocean and how wildlife work. This straight concrete seawall was not always a concrete seawall. It was likely a salt marsh or perhaps a rocky shore at one point, but we modified it because we want to live along the coast, and in order to live along the coast, we have to try and protect ourselves from the ocean and control what it does, and in doing that, we affect habitat and we affect wildlife. All right. Next thing that we use the ocean for is waste disposal. I don't need details here, but just to confirm, everybody here does use the washroom, right? Because that is probably what happens with most of us. So for those of you who are inland, treating your sewage is extremely important because there is always somebody downstream. For those of us on the coast, this has not always been the case. For many, many years, Canada's biggest cities did not treat their sewage. Here in Halifax, where I live, we've only just started treating our sewage. Halifax has been around for 300 or 400 years now, and we've never treated our sewage. All of our sewage used to go out a pipe and into our harbor. It doesn't happen that way anymore. We know that that's wrong, and it shouldn't be done that way. There are still cities who do it that way on the ocean because we assume the ocean can assimilate, the ocean can absorb all of that waste that we put in there, but in reality it can't. We do the same as well for our industries. Many of our industries produce chemicals or release toxic effluents to the environment. They're generally required to remove those and treat their effluents and sewage or waste products before they release it. But eventually it gets released, and there is always still products there. We rely on our environment and our ocean to be able to absorb and assimilate these things, whether it's sewage and waste from us or from industries that we all use. And the other one that I know everybody is going to say yes to, everyone here uses paper. Paper is produced by pulp and paper mills, and this is a product that comes about because of bleaching and a number of chemicals that are used to treat the wood fiber to create the white paper that you write on. And we all use these things as well, and as a result, we all have that connection to a use in the ocean. All right, the last category I'm going to talk about here is what I call just sort of global effects. The fact that we are on this planet, we have a number of effects on many, many ecosystems, not just the oceans, but it's having a big effect on the oceans. And this is a picture of a bunch of plastic bottle caps. Now, here's a question. This is sort of changing at the moment, but here's another question for you. How many people here use bottled water, disposable water bottles? So these are plastic bottles where they contain the water, and when you're done with it, you might try and reuse the bottle as much as you can, and I hope you do, but otherwise it ends up being disposed of, right? I think most of us have at one time or another, for sure. I know it's changing now. We're starting to realize it is not the way to go. We should be trying to avoid using these types of things. And plastics are something that are found everywhere in this world because we use them. And plastics don't disappear. Plastics don't degrade very slowly. They exist and they show up in the ocean. Plastic bags at a grocery store is another thing all of us have used at some time. 21 use plastic bottles. Wow, quite a few. So, and you may have heard this before. This is a plastic bag just floating over a reef. What does that plastic bag look like to everybody? It probably looks like a jellyfish of some sort. Well, it certainly looks like a jellyfish to animals that eat jellyfish, and they'll try and consume these things. Plastic breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces, but it doesn't ever disappear, or very slowly disappears, pardon me. But as it gets smaller and smaller, we don't see it anymore, but it is still there. And so the plastic pieces are still there. My computer is plastic. This mouse I'm holding in my hand is made of plastic. This mouse, the plastic that's used to create this mouse, will be on this planet long after I'm gone, long after my body has turned into something more interesting. This will still be a mouse, or it'll be ground up into tiny pieces and floating around the ocean. So this is one problem, a big problem we seem to be having, an abuse of the ocean that we see putting onto the ocean. A second one just mentioned, of course, is CO2. We put a lot of CO2 in the atmosphere, and this is because we have a fossil fuel-based culture and industry. Our society is based on fossil fuels. We burn a lot of fossil fuels, and CO2 goes into the atmosphere. What this is doing, I don't expect you to read all these equations, but very quickly, it's having a whole lot of effects on our globe. One of the effects it's having in the ocean is that when there's a lot of carbon dioxide in the air, it dissolves into the water. When there's a lot of carbon dioxide in water, it creates a weak acid called carbonic acid. And without getting into any details, carbonic acid makes it harder for animals to use the calcium carbonate that's in the ocean. Calcium carbonate is needed to make shells. And there's a lot of animals in the ocean that use shells. Some very important animals. This is a picture of a shell of what's called a pteropod, a little tiny animal that floats in the ocean and builds a small shell. And what they've done is they exposed it to a number of days to sort of a high environment with this carbonic acid, and you can see it dissolves the shell. So the amount of CO2 we're putting into the atmosphere is affecting the oceans, and in ways that we can't predict. We can start to think about what effect it might have, but we totally don't know. And another example of how our lifestyles are affecting the ocean and what it's going to do to them. Okay, so just to real quickly recap, I want to talk about how we use the ocean, why it's important to us, but also recognize there are abuses on the ocean that we use as well. So we fish the ocean because we need food, we use it as a resource that way, but overfishing, shifts in ecology, habitat destruction from destructive fishing, and bycatch, which is capturing and killing animals that we don't intend to, are all sort of abuses that come with this use. We transport goods across the ocean in large ships. The abuse this causes, of course, is that it affects wildlife by ship strikes, it creates noise, it can cause litter and pollution by oil spills. Non-renewable resources, such as oil, of course, the acoustic exploration, the seismic exploration can cause problems with the noise pollution. The Deepwater Horizon is an example of a spill, that pollution that can occur as a result of a spill in an accident in the Gulf of Mexico last year that you may have heard of. So there's a number of abuses that comes with this use of the ocean. We enjoy the ocean. We enjoy being with the ocean. We enjoy having a good time living near the ocean, as I do as well. And this leads to coastal development, modify habitats in the coastal environment to make sure that we can live there and enjoy it. Waste disposal, we need rid of our sewage. We add nutrients to the ocean because of it. In some cases, we have persistent chemical pollution because of the industries and products that we use, and often this finds its way into the ocean. And finally, global effects. Many of us are driven around and drive cars and participate in our fossil fuel society, and we're contributing to the accelerated rate of CO2 that we're putting into the atmosphere, which is having all kinds of effects on our world and in the ocean, and one example of which is acidification. And finally, plastics are found everywhere in our lives, and they don't ever they disappear from our lives, but they don't disappear from our planet, and they often show up in the ocean, and they're having their problems in the ocean too. Okay, so I don't be thoroughly disappointed in this at all. Things can change. I really want you to understand that. Things can really change here. And the most important thing that you need to remember is that you can make them change. You can make them change now. Now, as you learn about and understand your connection to the ocean and how you affect it, actually change things. And this is particularly because you guys don't even have an ocean near you. You have an ocean, it's over here with me. It's a part of you as well because you are responsible for looking after it. There's one on the other side of the country and one above us as well, north of us as well. So these are all your oceans, despite the fact that you don't get to see them as often as I do. But you can do things for them as well. Another thing to keep in mind, and we're going to talk about this on the next webinar. I want to talk about what you can do. But a thing to keep in mind, this is a grade, I understand, this is a grade 7-8 class, I think. And to me, what that means if you're, yeah, great, so grade 7-8 class, that means in 5 years, and probably no more than 10 years, you guys will be making decisions that affect how our planet works and what happens on our planet. And that includes the oceans as well. You will be decision makers affecting these things in as soon as 5 years, and you need to be ready for that. We don't need to be disappointed or overwhelmed by these challenges that are facing the ocean. We've been doing a lot of research. We didn't know that we could affect the ocean in the past. Now we know these things, and we know things that we know there are things that we don't even understand yet, but we need to understand them, and we need to be cautious as we move forward. So the next time we talk, I'm going to talk about some of the things you can do to get involved and help the ocean and be more aware of the ocean. And in the meantime, thanks a lot for inviting me back into your classroom, and I hope to talk to you soon. And if we have any questions, perhaps we can communicate by hand signals or a quick phone call. Thanks very much. Are we all done now? Thank you.